Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Define Disaster. This is Battlefield 1, and in today's video we're going to be covering the fall patch just recently released for Battlefield 1. We're going to be looking over all the available information on what has changed in this update to Battlefield 1. We're going to be summarizing the information available in roughly 5,000 words of patch notes, so you guys out there know all the new things, all the changes that have happened in Battlefield 1, and know exactly what to pay attention to when getting back into the game. Now, first things first, if you want the source of all this content, if you want the actual patch notes, which I will be referring to throughout this video, feel free to check the description down below. You'll find a link to the Battlefield forums where you can find all available information in the fullest detail regarding this patch to Battlefield 1. I am, of course, going to be summarizing and picking out what I deem to be the most important points and the ones which will have the most effect on gameplay in Battlefield 1. So if you're looking for the complete picture and not just basically the redacted, summarized version here, feel free to check the description for that link. But with that being said, let's start off with the game mode operations. I've seen some tweaks and updates in this edition of Battlefield. Now, first and foremost, we've had an increase of tickets for the attackers. DICE said that they seem to think that the attackers usually don't get past the first stage or the enough stages and don't really have a fair fighting chance, so they've decided to give them some improvements, some help in getting past those first initial hurdles. Now, for 64-player servers, this means that you have a maximum ticket increase from 150 all the way out to 250, so an additional 100 tickets there. In the case of the 40-player servers for operations, this has gone up from 150 to 200. Now, there's also been a change to the retreater kill tickets that you gain. Usually, when you kill an enemy that is within the area of the last objective, so who hasn't retreated successfully after losing a sector, you would get 2 tickets. This is now changed all the way up to 3 tickets. Furthermore, capturing a sector now gives you 50 instead of 30 additional tickets. This is also only relevant to the 64-player versions of operations. And last but not least, we have a slight reduced capture rate. That means it takes less time to capture an objective than it did before. This applies both to the 40 and 64-player versions of operations. Next up, then, we have some major changes to the Suez Canal conquest map, which of course was not very popular amongst the Battlefield community in this iteration of Battlefield 1. It was thought to be too much focused on close quarter, very much dependent on the behemoths spawning in, and usually didn't result in very fun gameplay, as one team would simply lock down the entire map and spawn camp the enemies. Now, DICE has tried to address this by basically increasing the combat size of the map, the area of the map that is relevant to players who want to play the objective, by changing the amount of flags from 3 all the way up to 5. So the map is actually now relatively large in comparison to what it usually was before. Now that the map is of course bigger, they thought they should add some additional vehicles to allow getting around the map a little bit easier. So each team has now got an additional armored car, which allows of course getting around the map a little bit quicker and allows flanking, which of course was very much one of the criticisms that was difficult to do previously on this map. Last but not least, regarding Suez Canal, they've also reduced the capture radius of what used to be points A and B, making it easier to clear out the enemies so they can't hide in too many buildings around the objectives, because of course, as you will recall, the capture radius of these objectives was so large that enemies could basically hide in so many different buildings. It was close to impossible to fully clear out those objectives to make sure that the enemy couldn't instantly cap it back. One of the best changes brought into Battlefield by this patch is arguably the squad leader changes, basically taking the system that was in place and replacing it by that was in place in Battlefield 4. As I'm sure you've all known, those of you who are looking for additional points to level up quicker, squad orders are an easy way to get that, and there's nothing more frustrating than an inactive squad leader, which there was arguably way too many of in Battlefield 1. Now, with these changes, what it allows to do is basically to take the squad leadership from them. So if somebody ignores the request for orders by their team, they will eventually lose the squad leadership to whoever is requesting orders. So the specifics of how this works is, if you request an order and your squad leader does not give one, within 60 seconds you will take over that squad leadership. If multiple people request, it is whoever gets or requests it first actually gets the squad leadership, and then we'll have 60 seconds once more to give an order before it passes on to whoever was next in the queue. This basically allows for active squad leaders that will make sure you're getting all the bonus points you want, or else you can take matters into your own hands. A much needed improvement to Battlefield, in my opinion. One of the most annoying parts of having to play with randoms is that they usually don't cooperate when it comes to things like squad orders, etc. And changing this, in my opinion, was the right step to do on DICE's part. On the other hand, I must question why this wasn't in the game from the start, but I guess it's really much a question of EA wanting to get the game out by a certain date and DICE not having time to implement all the features they necessarily had to. But with that being said, let's move on to a more general area of change that we've had in this iteration of Battlefield, in this patch of Battlefield, and that is the UI. There's been a number of changes to UI or UI related things that are much welcomed by the community, I am sure. First and foremost, you can now customize your soldier outside of the game and without having to go on battlefield.com or use the app. You can simply do this from the main menu. There's a small button under the main elements where you can access the customization of your soldier. As of current, however, this is not fully working. So for example, on some of the medic weapons, you don't actually have access to all the customization available to your weapon. I found this to be the case for things like magnification or reticle choice. I couldn't actually change those for any of my medic weapons when trying to edit my loadout in the normal settings and not through usual channels in the game itself. So DICE still needs to fix some of the things. However, at least they're working on it, and it's on its way to be the case that we can change our loadouts before actually getting into a game. Furthermore, you can now rent a server, your own private server, and this is a topic in itself, and as such I will be putting out a video on renting servers and the available settings and how to do so later on. So for this video, all you need to know is that you can rent a server now privately. If you want to know more about this, feel free to check out my video once that comes out regarding renting servers. Next up, then we have battle packs. You can now soon, not of now yet, apparently buy battle packs. For those of you so desperate to get skins that you wanted to spend real life money on them, I'm not quite sure why you would do that, but if you do, you will soon be able to do so. Next up, then we have the quit button, and this is also one of the changes that was very much necessary. You can now quit when the round is over, whenever you want. You don't have to wait till the next round is loaded until you get your quit button. The quit button will always be there as soon as you are in the end screen, so you can quickly exit a match after it is finished if you desire to do so. Great change, but once more DICE, this should have been in the game at the very start. Next up then, now new items that you can get from battle packs include things like squad XP boosts. Now the function of this item I believe is relatively self-explanatory. It's likely going to boost the amount of XP you get from squad activities, or it may actually just boost your XP gain for the entire squad. We yet have to see what this item does once we first get our hands on it. Battle packs, as you know, are relatively hard to come by sometimes, so it may take a while until I get my first squad XP boost in Battlefield 1. Another interesting point that I found in the patch notes, and I thought it was just worth mentioning because I didn't even know this was a thing, you apparently no longer get points for destroying your own team's behemoth. Apparently previous to this patch you could destroy your own team's behemoth and get the points for it, which is kind of hilarious and wrong, so DICE, good that you fixed that, but apparently you can't do that. So if you were a keen user of that exploit, I'm sorry to say the day has come where you're gonna have to stop with your shenanigans and put on a proper play the fucking objective face and get back to not grieving your team and helping your team out instead. Further changes to the behemoth are a change to the point system received when damaging it. Instead of getting chunks of 20 points when you've done enough damage to the behemoth, you will now get a point for every point of damage you do. So if you're using the anti-air, you will find yourself getting gradual increases of points, 1, 2, 3, instead of just eventually getting 20 points for doing a certain amount of damage to the behemoth. However, it should be noted the health of the behemoth has not per se changed, simply the way you receive points for damaging or destroying it. Another change, small change but noteworthy for those of you out there who like to troll, the syringe will no longer just be a one stab kill, I guess you could say, but you'll actually have to charge it up to do maximum damage. So the longer you charge the syringe up, the more damage it will do to your opponent when you finally prick them with that lethal needle. Before we get to some of the more interesting changes regarding weapon balance and gadget balance, still have a few to cover on the technical side of the way Battlefield runs. Now, Battlefield has been relatively, for Battlefield terms, smooth at launch and since. However, there are some major technical difficulties with the game. Most of those have been fixed. The ones worth noting, at least in this video, is DX12 performance and capability have generally all around been improved in a number of instances. So if you have a DX12 compatible graphics card and the necessary system to run it, you may want to try to use DX12 now that it has been improved. I personally can't tell you yet if it's improved over what it was before. I didn't have too many difficulties with DX12, but if you did, it may be worth now trying out Battlefield 1 once more on DX12 instead of DX11. Furthermore, the bug where reserving a slot when trying to join a friend already in the party, or just generally joining a friend who was already in the game and there was no slot available, it would usually just get stuck on reserving slot instead of putting you in queue, or once the slot was available, putting you in the game. That apparently has been removed. Something I am very thankful for, because as the people I play Battlefield with will be able to tell you about, I get rather salty when that kind of shit happens and rather angry at DICE. So good work on you DICE for fixing that very, very annoying bug which wouldn't allow me to join my friends for a good hour already in Battlefield 1. Now, getting into a larger field of changes relevant to everybody who is playing Battlefield 1, those of course regarding weapon balance. There's been a number of changes, of which a few are noteworthy, not all of them are. The ones which are though generally concerned for the most part the LMGs. They've gotten some love to make them a little bit more effective at medium range. DICE has recognized what I and pretty much every other person who's ever played Battlefield has seen. The LMGs currently didn't have much of a place in the game. The SMGs were close quarter and they were good at it. The DMRs were longish medium range and the sniper rifles of course long range, whereas the LMGs were supposed to be good at medium range but weren't, and in close quarter were clearly inferior to the SMGs because of matters of fire rate, hip fire and accessibility reload times. They were just generally inferior to the SMGs in close quarter and then really didn't have a place to be. So there wasn't really balance in that sense. They've apparently changed them and made them a little bit more usable at medium range. Now, the way I know DICE and having read the detail changes, the performance improvements are not going to be too good, but they are noteworthy enough that they should make them at least a little bit better at medium range. Now, some of those changes include things like increased suppression of your enemies at medium range when using the LMGs. They also include increased initial ADS accuracy. Thank you very much, DICE. I'm no longer shooting a potato gun. Apparently, the guns are now more accurate when initially firing them than they were before. Much needed improvement, I would like to add here. Furthermore, the first shot recoil multiplier has been decreased on a number of LMGs, such as the Lewis and Hughes. Another one is that the bar has sadly seen a bit of a nerf. It's got more horizontal recoil apparently now than it used to. How much this is going to affect the performance of the weapon, I don't know. However, I would like to note I don't think this was very much necessary, DICE, because the bar with only 20 rounds of a magazine wasn't exactly the most overpowered gun in Battlefield 4. It would have just been a little bit more wise to lift some of the other guns up to its level instead of putting it down. But that's the choice DICE has made, and you should be aware of it when trying to use the bar. Next up, bipods have been added to a number of the low-weight LMGs. It didn't specify which LMGs were considered low-weight, but in case you notice a sudden bipod on your gun, it's because DICE decided that it now had to have one in this fall patch. Another change, but this is no longer relevant to the LMGs, and we also are coming, is a bit of a nerf to the Hellriegel. Now, the Hellriegel has seen some nerf and some buffs at the same time. So its overheating has slowed, so it won't overheat as quickly, so you can shoot through even more enemies than you could before with its 60-round magazine before it overheats. However, it has gotten slightly more horizontal recoil, making it, of course, less effective at medium range. A change I'm not sure I welcome as much because the Hellriegel, well, A, I just unlocked it and I didn't get a chance to really abuse it, and B, I think it would have been a wiser move to make the LMGs just a lot more powerful at medium range, and thus the Hellriegel with its inferior damage model not being such a competition to it at medium range. But this is, as said, the way DICE has thought to go about it, so the Hellriegel is no longer quite as easy to use at medium range. It's got a little bit more horizontal recoil. However, it does not have more vertical recoil. So if that's what you struggle with the Hellriegel, you shouldn't be worried too much. That hasn't changed from what it was previously. Last but not least, there's two changes regarding some other guns, namely the Russian 1895 infantry and sniper. Apparently, their fire rate has been decreased to what it said in Battlelog, because apparently it was higher, as I falsely pointed out in one of my weapon reviews on the weapon. It was at 60 something according to Simthic. It is now at, I think, 56, something like that, as it always said in Battlelog. So in case you were using that gun, it now fires slightly slower, but in my opinion, this shouldn't change the behavior of the sniper rifle too much. It is, after all, a sniper rifle and not an SMG or a shotgun used in close quarter. And then we also have the MLE 1903. Its reload time has been decreased, in case you wanted to know. Now you know. Next up, and last but not least, gadgetry. Something that a lot of us wanted to see some nerfs and changes. I know I am one of those people. First and foremost, we have some changes to the gas and incendiary tripwires. You now have two instead of one of them, because apparently they weren't being used very much, so DICE decided to make a passive Claymore style gadget even more powerful. So if you thought that they weren't worth using before, you can now use the double amount of them. I'm not quite sure what I think about this. I haven't been killed by any one of these gadgets ever before, so if it's a problem, then it's now more of a problem. I just think most people are just going to still stick away from them and not use them at all, but that's been changed. You can now carry two of these instead of one. This does not, however, apply to the normal tripwire that just blows people up, so you'll still only be able to carry one of those. Mortars, thankfully, have seen some nerfs as well. However, sadly, they have also seen some buffs. The buff include that they can now fire additionally to their other munition, their other shells, 2 smoke shells that you can fire into random groups of people to help your team, I assume, advance up on an enemy position. I'm not exactly objected to this. This is a more tactical use of the mortar and won't actually directly get you indirect fire kills, which is what annoys me so much about mortars. However, their spamming ability has been nerfed in a number of ways. changes. Firstly, spam firing will actually affect the accuracy of the mortar. So if you thought you can just put as many rounds down range without there being any effect to the accuracy of the mortar, this is now changed much the way it used to be in Battlefield 4. So the reticle, your reticle that points to you where you're firing on the minimap, will slowly get tighter and tighter until it becomes a dot. Then you are 100% accurate with your shot. You can shoot faster than that. As we all know, you could exit out of the view that you get when firing your mortar to quickly fire a second round. However, this will come at the price of decreased accuracy of that shot, unless of course you wait to fire that second shot until your mortar is fully accurate again. A much welcome change that will hopefully decrease mortar spam on game modes, especially like operations, where it can be especially difficult to move up on a point and especially annoying once you've been killed by a mortar the third time in a row. The last but minor change to gadgetry is the rifle grenade. There is now a delay between firing it and actually going off into the distance, much like you had, for example, with the Magnum in Battlefield 4. There was a small trigger delay. This is now the case with the rifle grenade as well. Overall, though, the rifle grenade has been made a little bit snappier. It explodes a little bit quicker after bouncing off things. So there's kind of a trade-off and an advancement of the gadget. So if you're a keen user of those, then you shouldn't be finding too much of a drawback to that. Just be aware of that small delay when firing it. You may find yourself firing into the wall in front of you if you're shooting it while moving behind cover. And that, of course, is not what you're initially intending to do with it. With that being said, though, that covers all the noteworthy changes, at least in my opinion, that I picked out when reading the full change log, the full patch notes to this patch, the fall patch to Battlefield 1. Feel free to leave down below in the comments your opinions on these changes, opinions on other things they should still change, as well as if I've missed something, if you actually went and read the full patch notes. I'd be interested to see how many of you actually intend to read the full patch notes, so leave that down below in the comments as well, of course, as your usual video suggestions, both for Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 4. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching this very long video and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.